right now. All right. Cool. So I guess we can get started. So, we first want to quickly introduce everybody that has been really working hard on creating this presentation for you today. If you could go to the next slide. So again, I'm Margaret, and we also have Mallory Kastner, Colin Battis, John Luca Benton, and we are seniors that are part of the Haverford and Bryn Mawr College's Environmental Studies Department, and this presentation is part of our senior project. We've also are collaborating with the Clean Energy Co-op, which includes Joy Baxter, Christine Wigand, and Jen Leith. Next slide. We also want to give a really brief introduction of the Clean Energy Co-op. The Clean Energy Co-op is a membership-based organization that allows everyone to invest in renewable energy projects, such as solar, for local nonprofits or community organizations and businesses, which includes houses of worship, low-income housing, theaters, firehouses, and more. The pictures on the slide are the 4 projects that the Clean Energy Co-op has helped to invest in. There are 2 active development areas currently, one in the northeastern Pennsylvania, Wayne County, and one that is new in spring 2021, the southeastern Pennsylvania, greater Philadelphia area. The Clean Energy Co-op allows community members to invest in these types of projects. And if you don't want to invest, you can still be an active participant in the co-op. And so now we're going to go into a quick timeline. So for the next 30 minutes, we're going to go through how to purchase a solar system in Pennsylvania, who's a good candidate for solar, financing models that you can choose with no upfront cost, where to get started with solar, and a Q&A, which will be hosted by Sharon Pillar from the Pennsylvania Solar Center, Shannon Crooker from Sustainable Energy Fund, and Peter Puglianesi from Solarize Delco. In addition, this presentation will be available to everyone at the end of our time together. We've added links throughout the presentation to different organizations in case you want to spend more time learning about solar energy and different financial models. So now we're going to go into introduction to solar energy. So how does solar energy work? What are the benefits of solar? What are the costs of installing solar systems? Who is a good candidate for solar? And what if you're not a suitable candidate? So just a quick introduction of how solar electricity works. Power comes from solar panels, which is usually on the roof. And so when sunlight hits the panels, it's converted into electricity. That electricity can go into powering your house, as you can see through this little animation. And if there's too much electricity, it'll go back into the grid. So when there's not sunlight, so when it's really foggy outside one day or it's during the nighttime, the grid system stores up electricity throughout the day to transfer it back into the house. A new solar electricity is credited to next month's bill at a full retail rate and rolls over month to month. So why solar? So for one thing, you can fight global warming and reduce pollution, which is a really huge part of why you should go solar. According to Project Drawdown, solar energy was the number 10 solution to reduce global warming. Your house will also have a higher property value. On Zillow, houses with solar panels have a 4% increase in property value. You will also get a good return on investment, whether you install solar panels directly or join a co-op in the long term. We will talk a lot more about this return on investment in later slides, as it differs in how you invest in solar, but ultimately, you will not need to pay for electricity that you produce. Finally, there is no routine maintenance needed. Once you have installed solar panels, you don't need to worry about spending money maintaining them every month unless a rare circumstance has occurred. So I've kind of foreshadowed about talking about investment, so I'm going to pass it on to Colin to talk about why solar is a good long-term financial investment.
Yeah, you've probably heard a lot about solar energy's environmental benefits. But you're also probably wondering about the practical side of how solar can help you. So we want to emphasize upfront that solar is actually a really good long-term investment. Compared to the average $30,000 that Pennsylvanians spend on power over 25 years, the freedom to generate your own power and then make money on the extra through net metering is actually really significant. If we can move to the next slide, yeah. So we'll come back to this graph a few times to compare what that return on investment looks like for different models, comparing the cash flow. This first example shows the cost of purchasing panels upfront, which is the most expensive method, but also has the biggest return on investment over time. There are different ways to get started with solar. You don't want to spend the time to find the best option for you. But on the whole, a solar system is going to be an improvement over any electric bill in the long run. So to help you get an idea of the kind of savings that you can see from solar panels, here are some averages for an 8.3 kilowatt system, which is a typical size for a large household or small businesses. Most businesses actually can see better savings than this because installing panels gets more cost effective at larger sizes. These are just some rough numbers for two systems of the same size. So in addition to the extra income you make by selling energy back to the grid through net metering, this also shows a current estimate of income that you get from selling SRECs, or solar renewable energy credits, which is when you're generating solar power, you're getting credits that other companies can purchase to offset their own carbon emissions. This income isn't very high right now because PA doesn't have a very strong market in these. The price would increase if we saw stronger solar legislation in the future, which there is actually legislation being introduced right now that would increase our mandated level of solar power and then make the price of these go up. We can't depend on that, obviously, so this is just the current trend in value. In addition, residential buyers get a pretty hefty tax credit for buying solar systems. As long as the construction starts the next 2 years, you're eligible for 26% of the value of the system over its entire lifetime. And businesses actually get that credit. Plus, they can count the panels as depreciable assets, which means they just decrease in value over time. So they can reduce the price even more through a tax offset. Unfortunately, nonprofits aren't eligible for this credit. And without that credit to help ease the cost of solar panels, nonprofits will often find their best option isn't purchasing these panels upfront. We'll get back to some other options later that might be more competitive for nonprofits. And still, these averages here are just averages, estimates. Everything from the angle of your roof to your home grid connection and wiring, how you're being billed for the project, all of that affects these specific costs. It's hard to talk in specifics about solar power, unfortunately, because it varies really widely based on the site, and it depends on the appraisal of where it's being installed. But this is a idea of the savings you can see.
So for people interested in installing solar onto their business or house, a main question that comes to mind is my home or business suitable for rooftop solar? And so to answer this question, one of the main responses is it's all up to your roof. It has to be unshaded, have a south facing or flat roof. If the lifetime of your roof is less than 20 years, you should replace your roof before installing solar panels. However, every house is different. You might have a north facing roof or maybe not even a flat roof, but you still might be able to get solar. So one of the best ways to check whether or not your roof is suitable is to check Project Sunroof, which you can see on the right. It can give you a rough analysis of your solar potential, with yellow being a great solar potential and the orange and the dark red being not so great solar potential. It can tell you also how much you can save with getting solar energy. But the best way to figure it out is to get a free cost estimation from a solar installer. There's no strings attached, and it's a great way to analyze whether your roof on your home or business is suitable for solar. And if your organization or house is not suitable for solar, you can also join and invest in solar co-ops such as the Clean Energy Co-op, or you can buy 100% renewable electricity at makebenproud.com. And finally, you can also address climate change through other ways, such as looking into energy efficiency, looking into electric vehicles, having a plant-based diet, and supporting environmental and climate justice groups.
Another purchasing option, if you do want to buy solar systems outright, is to do a solar group buy through Solarize. Solarize is a local group, and essentially they negotiate the best price with an installer of their choosing, and that streamlines the process for a large number of people. And so this process is done with Solarize Delco and Solarize Philly, which are respectively based in Delaware County and Philadelphia. And this process essentially includes their pre-selection of a single trusted installer. And after that, the group buy is promoted and negotiated by Solarize for the customers. And then the more people enter the group buy, the bigger the discount. So as we can see on this table at the bottom of the slide, as the number of customers increases, so from this blue arrow, which is associated with the leftmost column of the table, as the number of customers increases, the savings in dollars per watt of electricity also increases. So for example, if you have 20 customers participating in the group buy, you will save 5 cents per watt. But if 100 customers participate per watt of electricity, you'll save 25 cents. So this is really important in getting a large number of people to get the best deal. And as the number of customers increases, that means that the share of the cost reduction increases as well. So that can account for 8 to 10% below the market value of solar if you have a lot of people participating. And so just think of this as being analogous to buying in bulk. So the more you buy, the cheaper it's going to be by piece. And in this case, the piece is the person and how much you're paying for solar. But what if you don't have the capital to pay for the system upfront? For the moment, we've been talking about directly investing $10,000 to $20,000 directly into essentially directly paying a solar installer for the solar panels, and then it's a one and done deal. But that's actually not the only financial model available. And one common misconception for solar is that solar panels are expensive, and if you can't pay the upfront cost, you can't get solar. And that's actually not true. There are a lot of financing models out there that can meet you where you're at in your financial situation. And we'll be talking about a few of these in the next few slides. These include buying the system with a loan, getting a solar lease, getting a power purchase agreement or PPA, and the Commercial Property Assessed Clean Energy or CPACE program. And this last one is mainly for large businesses and nonprofits. And in the next few slides, we'll be talking about what exactly these are, what the pros and cons are, and where to get started and what resources are available to you. When you buy the system with a loan, that means you can buy the system with zero upfront cost. And in this table format, I will go through what the pros and cons are for whether you're resident, business, or nonprofit. So in this blue box are the common pros and cons to all three sectors. And the first one is that you have ownership of the solar system installed. And this is actually really important because this means that you have access to the tax benefits, which I'll talk about further. You also reduce and eliminate your electric bills over the 25 or more year life cycle of your solar system, which means that the monthly bills you're currently paying for your electricity, if your production covers all of your consumption, then those will just be deleted. You will also get immediate returns on investment from sold SRECs, and Colin mentioned them briefly. So if you produce excess energy, you can sell that excess energy to your local utility and they'll add it to the grid and you'll get money in return. You'll also be protected from fluctuating utility prices since you become your own solar producer, energy producer, sorry. And your home or building also increases in property value and is easier to sell than with a lease or a PPA. Note that now these statements are bolded, which means that all the bolded ones will be specific to buying the system with a loan versus all of these previous pros were also applicable to buying the system outright, which is what we talked about earlier. So with a loan, you will get generally lower payments than with a solar lease or a PPA. However, the application periods will take longer. And the most important con for buying the system with a loan is that you have interest rates, which means that ultimately the solar system will be more expensive than if you bought it upfront. You also need a good credit score. For businesses in particular, solar can be considered a depreciable asset, which is a big pro. And for both residents and businesses, you will have investment tax credits or ITC and rebates. And that's like the 26% tax credit that Colin mentioned earlier. Note that these tax credits are not available for nonprofits. And so that means that buying the system with a loan may actually not be the most financially beneficial and advantageous for a nonprofit, but there are other options available. And for businesses and nonprofits, if protecting the environment is a big part of your mission or your values, this really demonstrates your commitment to sustainability and shows that you're putting your money where your mouth is. On this graph, we can see cash flow over 25 years, comparing the upfront cost and how much you would save buying the system outright versus if you're buying the system with a loan, and how that compares to not going solar at all. And so if this is again based on the 8.3 kilowatt system, which is an average size system for a home. You could save an average of $13,600 over 25 years if you purchased a solar system with a loan. And this is lower than buying the system upfront, which is where you can maximize your savings and get $25,000 over 25 years. But it's really, you can really tell that you still earn a lot more money than if you didn't go solar at all. When you buy the system with a loan, there are two options. You can get a secured loan or an unsecured loan. When it's secured, the lender will ask for collateral, which is generally your property. And in an unsecured loan, you will generally have higher monthly payments. And where to get a loan will differ depending whether you're a resident, a business owner, or a nonprofit. Though for all 30 banks and solar companies and installers are pretty good bets. And you can see a list of those that offer loans on the Energy Sage website. The Clean Energy Credit Union for residents is another option, and their current APR is as low as 4.99%. For businesses, the Clean Energy Co-op provides loans, and for nonprofits as well, though this would be in conjunction with a grant. If you want more guidance on any of these, contact the Clean Energy Co-op if you're a business or nonprofit and want a loan, or also see the Solarize Southeast PA and PA Solar Center website for more information.
So leases are another option if you don't have the money to buy a system upfront, but you do also have strong credit. With a lease, the panels are installed on your property, but you won't own them, so you don't get the tax benefits. It also means that you don't are responsible for any maintenance costs. You don't own the system, so the installer is responsible for all of the maintenance that might pop up in an event. Instead of the electric bill, you're going to be paying still a monthly price to the installer, but that cost is you're just paying for the value of the system over the length of that lease contract. These payments are still lower on average than utility bill, about 10% lower on usually. So you can save around $6,500 over 25 years. It does represent much lower savings than purchasing the system because you don't benefit from those tax credits. Many companies do have a system similar to net metering, where instead of being paid for excess energy that you're not using is going into the grid is just being credited towards your next lease payment. So we can move to the next slide. So yeah, leases are typically less common, and these contracts do vary a lot based on who is receiving them, if you're a resident, a business, or a nonprofit. Lease contracts for residents are usually about 15 to 20 years long. For a business or a nonprofit, usually 7 to 10 years. Most contracts do the option to buy them out earlier and become the owner of the panels, though, if you would like to raise the money to do that at some point. Like any big purchase, like leasing a car, you're going to want to carefully look over any lease contract because it does affect the value of your property. You're going to probably want a real estate lawyer to help you with that. Most leases are transferable if you sell your house or your property, but the buyer does have to be approved to take on the contract, and they also have to agree to take it on. They might not want to assume the lease. Also, because the panels will increase your property value, but you won't receive a tax credit for them, you definitely want to make sure that you won't end up paying more in property taxes than you save. If you're a business, if you're considering a lease, you probably want to get that lease through a financing company. They will source an installer for you, especially for a larger scale installation that makes the process easier for getting a lease as a business. Now, for nonprofits, I want to specifically mention a business called Collective Sun that can make a lease actually a pretty attractive option. Because nonprofits don't benefit from the investment tax credit anyway, Collective Sun assumes ownership of the panels. They benefit from the tax credits, but they just offer you a 12% discount on any installation cost, whatever it might cost for your nonprofit organization to have the panels through a loan, through a purchase. Collective Sun, if you go through a lease process with them, they'll offer you that system for 88% of the cost instead of 100%, which can actually make a lease definitely more useful than for a resident or a business.
Great. So shifting gears now, I'm going to be talking about another avenue of getting solar on your home, business, or nonprofit, and that is a power purchase agreement. And so a power purchase agreement is probably the most hassle-free and the most similar to a traditional electricity payment style that you'll encounter in the solar world. And so how a PPA system works is, instead of actually buying the panels or leasing the panels or buying the panels with a loan, you actually are letting a solar company use your roof, and they're putting the solar panels on your roof, but you aren't paying for the panels. So essentially, they're putting them on for you with zero upfront cost. And then for your part, what you're doing is you're going to buy the electricity generated from those panels, and you'll be paying the solar installer that electricity rate. And so that electricity rate will be billed similar to a traditional electricity bill, where you'll be billed by the kilowatt hour, and typically in the sort of the same sort of ballpark that you normally be paying. And so in that way, it's sort of the least commitment and least of a financial headache that you'll encounter. And yeah, typically the PPA agreements are in a contract form, and they typically last in the 20 to 25-year range. So again, the biggest boon here is zero upfront cost. And so sort of the general overview again, there is essentially when you enter the contract, you're entering it at a fixed rate of what you're paying for electricity from the panels. And then I guess I should mention too, all excess energy that you need to use that aren't coming directly from the panels in the PPA, you'll continue to just buy from the grid. And there also is a potential option to purchase the panels at a later date. If you just, you love having solar in your home and the contract ends. Of course, the downsides here, you do not own the panels. They're still the property of the solar company. You're pretty much just offering them the space to put them up and providing the revenue for the panels. So in that way too, you will not realize the tax or SREC benefits. And there is a potential challenge down the road when selling your property. If you decide to sell your property in the middle of the PPA contract, and the next owner decides to vacate, there might be some issues there, but that's a down the line issue to consider. So for residents and also for businesses, it's definitely the most hassle-free in terms of just making a switch. And so in that way too, most solar installers and Solarize have a PPA option. So we definitely recommend either following up on the Solarize website or just finding your local solar installer to find out more. And then another great resource to learn more about PPAs and sort of to field quotes even is the Energy Sage Marketplace. And within the marketplace, there are specific filters to set for a PPA. So if you think that this is what you want to look for and what you want for your home, you can make that choice already as you're searching. And then finally, for nonprofits, it's a bit more difficult to set up, but there is a potential partnership to be made with the Clean Energy Co-op, which we talked about earlier. So the Clean Energy Co-op, their investment model looks for or seeks out nonprofit roofs or roofs of nonprofits for their solar sites that align with their mission. So there's a potential, if you're interested in sort of setting up a PPA on your roof as a nonprofit, and you want to see if maybe the Clean Energy Co-op could be sort of your partner in that, we definitely recommend reaching out to them and following up. We have members of the Clean Energy Co-op here tonight, and they'll speak during the Q&A too, so you'll have them. And finally, for a nonprofit, the most profitable avenue for PPAs for a nonprofit is through a one-person LLC model. We don't have the time to get into sort of the weeds on how that would work. It's a bit more complex, but if you are sort of more bottom dollar concerned as a nonprofit, we would definitely recommend reaching out to Joy Baxter, who's also here tonight. And also we put her email address here to follow up. And she's also a contact for the Clean Energy Co-op if you're interested in that avenue as well. Finally, CPACE. So CPACE is a loan program that is specifically for commercial businesses and nonprofits. And so these are loans that are offered through a Pennsylvania sponsored program, and they can provide up to 100% funding for the project. And what happens is the loan is based off an assessment on the property. So it's not based off an assessment on the business or the nonprofit, which is something to consider. So it's definitely important to either own your property or obviously to have permission of the property owner. And another thing to keep in mind with the CPACE loan, if you're a bigger organization, this is probably the best way to go in terms of securing loan money, since their loans are typically in the much larger range than you would need for a smaller project. They're typically in the 250,000 plus range. And these loans are long-term and typically in the 5 to 6% interest rate range. And if your roof needs to be replaced to have solar, there actually is a way to secure financing for that through CPACE as well. So that's another thing to keep in mind. And finally, it's important to note too that CPACE is only available in certain counties at the moment. So in our local area here, they are available, or the program is available in Montgomery, Berks, Wayne, and Philadelphia counties. And also, they'll also soon be introducing CPACE programs in Delaware and Chester County if you live there. So finally, CPACE project, as you can see, there's a bunch of steps, but they're all pretty straightforward. The most important steps, if you are interested in sort of, taking that first leap or investigation into CPACE, is first, obviously making sure that you're in a county that has a CPACE program. And then B, you want to identify your project so you know your roof, what sort of scale you're looking at. And then finally, to find a capital provider through CPACE. So the CPACE has a list of like official verified providers, and you would want to explore that list and find sort of the right fit for you. And that can be accessed through the Sustainable Energy Fund website, which is here hyperlinked, and also the Philadelphia Energy Authority, which is focused specifically on the Philadelphia area.
So whichever option here works for you, it's important to note that actually the best time to invest in solar is going to be right now, because in 2023, that tax credit for investing in solar is decreasing to 22% of the system's value from 26%. After 2023, it's going down to 0 for residential, only 10% for commercial owners. So not only is it going to be more expensive for you to buy your own solar system, it's going to make it more expensive for all solar, likely at least for a few years, because the profit margins will shrink in the solar industry. As we mentioned earlier, you can get a quick idea of whether your roof is right for solar through Project Sunroof. It's not a perfect system, so the best way is definitely to contact local solar installers. If you aren't able to get the power on your roof, there's still plenty of ways that you can invest or look into solar power. But right now is actually the best time, because in about 3 years, the prices are going to increase at least somewhat. So after the presentation, we're going to share a copy of these slides with all of you so you can explore these resource links that we have here. The PA Solar Center, who are here with us for the Q&A session, they have really good lists of reliable installers and of opportunities for solar that might be helpful for you or for your organization. Because as we said, solar is really specific to your location, to your building and property. It's hard to know in advance what it looks like specifically. There's no one solution that's going to fit everyone, but there is a solution out there that is going to work for you somehow. So now we're going to transition into our Q&A section. We'll be taking questions in the chat. Looks like we don't have unanswered questions right now. There is the one about Google Maps earlier. But if you do have any questions, we have the PA Solar Center, we have people from the Clean Energy Co-op, the Sustainable Energy Fund, and Solarize, so we're all here and happy. So if you have any questions, we'd invite you to submit them in the chat, and we can bring them up and talk about them.
Jory, I think you're muted.
Oh. I am Joy Baxter. And I'm with here in Southeast Pennsylvania with the Clean Energy Co-op and helping these students to get ready for their talk. I do want to just clarify a couple points. First, the SRECs are actually valued on the entire electricity that you produce. And it's the only thing I can remember right now.
So it looks like first question from Jennifer about our thoughts on the advances in solar panels over time. And obviously it's sort of a more theoretical question. It's hard to say, for sure what it looks like. I do know that there's new forms of solar panels that are more compact, ones that are foldable or more lightweight. So I think in the future, the deployment of solar will actually be easier because it'll be less dependent on specific kinds of rooftop installations. Other people can speak to this as well who are here. But in the future in general, the price of solar and the availability is definitely going to increase with these new technological advancements. And even with that decrease in the tax credit, as I mentioned, the price is going up most likely. That will probably be counterbalanced in the long run through this large-scale investment.
This is Peter. I did want to chime in that there is evolutionary improvements in efficiency of the panels really every year. So the output on a standard panel size has been going up a few percentage points a year on average as manufacturers get better and better at squeezing out more efficiency.
Another question we have in the chat is, what's the lag time between starting the process and having a functioning solar system? Does the PA Solar Center or SCF or Solarize want to take that?
Sure. This is Sharon Pillar. I'm the executive director at the Pennsylvania Solar Center. You all did an amazing job. This is really awesome. Thank you so much. I think the question is, it depends. Is it residential, commercial, nonprofit? So, if it depends, on how busy the installers are. But once you make the decision, the actual installation of the project, say for a home, you're saying residential, is only a few days that they'll be there on site. But then it could be weeks or months until the interconnection is approved by the utility, just depending on how that whole process goes. And if you're waiting till the end of the year to make the decision to go solar, you'll probably wait a longer time because that's typically when the solar installation companies are the busiest. People trying to get things in by the end of the year so they can claim those tax credits.
Yeah, our rule of thumb for solarized Delco is decide by September 30th if you want to have completion and the ability to take the tax credit in a certain year. So if you do the math, you really have a decision plus 3 months typically.
There's a question about what is the average cost per kilowatt hour for installation? Sharon, do you want to take that?
Yeah, and again, it depends on what you're looking at and the size of the system. It's really dependent on the size, and it also could depend on the complexity of the installation. So like if you have a home that's really tall with really steep roof, it's just going to be a longer time on site and more safety precautions than if you have, like, say, a flat roof. So those are kind of different considerations, but and it varies by region. But we're seeing on residential, we look at this at a per watt usually rate. So around $2.50 to $3 per watt, kind of on average. could be a lot more, could be less. On larger commercial systems that are over like 100 kilowatts, we're seeing that jump or come down quite a bit into the $1.80 range. And then as you get larger systems, they're even cheaper than that. I don't know if anybody else has other solarized Delco, what you're seeing.
There's one question about the comment about having to need lighter solar panels for older homes. And I think that's been answered in the chat, but I think Colin mentioned lighter solar panels. I think a lot of the applications for those would be not for home use. Other people can correct me on that. But the typical panels are going to be way less than a big snowstorm that we get around here. And the roofs have to be assessed as part of the process to make sure they're structurally, they could structurally support the panels, and that's all included in your solar installation.
I saw a question in the chat about the sustainability of solar panels, how they're sustainably produced, and the carbon footprint of them. And the truth is that to produce panels, they do have to mine materials. Usually all panels have silicon in them. Some newer panels have additional materials as well. They usually have some rare earth materials. So the main carbon emissions in producing the panels are of the mining and the manufacturing. However, so there is some carbon involved. However, comparing the life cycle of a panel, and the newer panels are also much more resilient than past generations, and they last for longer. So comparing the life cycle of solar panels to basically another power source, including other manufactured renewables, solar panels do come out basically ahead of most other power sources except for, I believe, hydro power. But then hydro is site dependent, obviously, on being near running water or tides. And as whether they're recyclable, I see that as well. That depends on the panel, I believe, because some of the materials can be reused. Some of them do become electronic waste after they are no longer usable. That's unfortunate. I know that the research is always continuing, though, and there's new generations that are being developed that are improving the longevity and the ability to reuse the components.
Colin, this is Sharon, if I could jump in on that too. On the carbon footprint, it's been a while since I looked at it, but it looks like it'll take about 3 years of your energy production from solar to sort of break even on your carbon footprint from the manufacturing. So after 3 years of using solar energy, you're breaking that on your carbon footprint there. On the recyclability, there are a number of companies now that are starting to recycle panels. The majority of the panels are made of glass. That's the largest portion will be recycled. A lot of panels that we're seeing, if it's broken or something like that, obviously recycling is probably necessary. But if it's not, these things are functioning for decades and decades. So beyond the lifetime warranties of 25 years, they could be functioning, for 30, 35, 40 years afterwards. So what we're seeing is maybe some companies have had panels for a long time and they're taking them, replacing them, putting more efficient panels, and then they can be reused. So there's even a group called Power Up Gambia, which is, I think, located near southeastern Pennsylvania, that they take used solar panels to the Gambia to power hospitals. So there's lots of opportunities for reuse of panels, as well as recycling.
There's a question that's been was asked by Sarah Jessup and has been re-asked by Jennifer that I think is a perfect question for Joy and the Clean Energy Co-op. So there's a question, it says, if you're in a forested or shaded area, is there an option to buy into solar elsewhere? Joy, do you want to talk about the co-op and that potential avenue for solar?
Right. So the students brought up that you can buy renewable electricity and also you could invest in this clean energy co-op and then help to develop other solar projects. If there is almost every year now legislation to coming up for Pennsylvania to have community solar, that would have to be passed in order for you to directly benefit from a specific solar installation that's nearby. But until that is passed, your options are helping to promote solar and develop solar through the Clean Energy Co-op and buying renewable electricity, and then also utilizing all the great ways that we can reduce our carbon footprints, including, having great insulation in our houses.
There was a question about battery backup, which I could take. So most installations are connected to the grid. And so for a residential situation, battery doesn't necessarily improve your economics. The main reason to consider battery backup is if you have frequent blackouts. So batteries in conjunction with appropriate switching systems that can disconnect you from the grid will essentially give you a little bit of emergency power. Battery backup, maybe a more interesting situation going forward with time of day rates. I'm not sure how that's going to affect the battery and solar economics, but for commercial applications, commercial power is sold with a peak power fee, and batteries can make a significant difference in those commercial electric bills. Hope that answers your question.
There's a question about the statewide targets in solar, if it's okay to mention the policy that we're working on. Senate Bill, sorry, I'm just talking about House Bill 1080 and Senate Bill 501 were just introduced to increase our renewable energy targets, which are now at 8% by this May. It was passed 2004. In this May, they're going to be met. So 8% renewables by May 2021 with 0.5% of solar as the goal. The new bills, Senate Bill 501 and House Bill 1080, would increase that goal to 18% overall renewables by 2026 with a carve out of 5.5% solar by that time. So legislators absolutely really need to hear from you about that. And that directly impacts those renewable energy credits that that has been talked about today. Increasing those goals will increase the renewable energy credits and make solar more financially feasible.
Sharon, there is a request to put those bill numbers in the chat.
Oh, great. I'll do that right now.
There's a question about how battery backup relates to net metering. So net metering is basically when you're not directly using the power from the electricity from the panels, you get credited what goes back to the grid. So I personally do not have a battery backup system in my home, but if the electricity is going to go into the battery, I guess there's going to be, if you don't use that electricity, there will be some losses. So I guess overall you might have a little bit less overall benefit, you know, on a day-to-day basis, just because of some of the losses in the battery that you're going to be powering and then the battery is going to be losing. But overall, probably you're not going to see much of a difference. I do not see any more questions in the chat that have not been answered. If we've missed one of yours, go ahead and unmute and ask your question.
While we're waiting, I did see one regarding the group rates decrease as more people get solar, your rate goes down. I think that question may relate to, you know, so Solarize is by its nature sort of a group purchase program slash, you know, outreach and information program. So Solarize Southeast Delco does have an arrangement with its installer that does have an incentive for reaching a certain number of installs per year. So there are rebates for hitting, you know, 20, 30, 40 installs in Delaware County under the program in a particular year. But that's going to vary, I think, depending on whose program it is.
There's a question about a ground mounted system. Sharon, do you want to take that?
Oh, any special considerations? I guess it depends on the size of the system that you're looking for. Is it for a house or is it for something larger? Again, I think just calling the solar installers and having them take a look, but generally generally, you know, flat piece of land that's pretty stable is obviously great. If it's south facing, that can also be really helpful. Yeah, so it just depends on the location and some of those things. I would just encourage you just to look at how the solar developer come out and take a look. And obviously no shading is helpful. There are some municipalities that have regulations around ground mounted systems. So that would be something that you might want to check out, is the permitting or the zoning rather in your municipality, because some don't allow it. Some have specific requirements around like fencing and other kind of vegetation or screening, that type of thing around them. So, and what it has to be a side yard or backyard or those kind of things. Those would all be things that you know, would look at from the municipal level.
So my township does not have any regulations. I live along the Susquehanna River, so I was going to try and mount it maybe 6 feet up in the air, just to avoid any potential. I mean, I'm in a 500-year floodplain, so I don't expect it. But my thought would be that if I mount it up a little bit higher, because I have much better, less trees than on my roof, and my roof isn't quite big enough for the power requirements.
Yeah, there is, and this is not my area of expertise, but the higher you get, the more concern you have with wind load. So again, I think getting a developer to come out and look at that would be probably your best bet to do. But it sounds like a really interesting possibility.
We have a question that I was hoping Christine can answer from the Clean Energy Co-op. If you become a member of the Clean Energy Co-op, will you receive a report at the end of the year how much of your membership helped to generate so many kilowatt hours?
Yes, that's a great question. We currently have the 4 projects that the students mentioned, and 2 of them, the co-op ourselves own the system, and we certainly have access to the generation. In fact, one of our members is working on a web-based reporting system for all the generation. The other two of our projects were farmers, and basically how we supported them was through loans. And so we don't own those systems. And so it would be voluntary for them to join on and put their generation on there. But it is actually a really good idea to include that in our newsletters. We talk about it among ourselves at our board meetings, etc. But to really include that in our newsletters for members, I think that's pretty neat. I don't know if anyone else has a comment, Jamie or Joy. Or Michelle. I saw Michelle here. She's one of the founding members of the co-op. I did see another question early on that I thought was interesting. I can't answer it. Pam asked, she said she had a solar company come to the house in Bucks County and was told that the grid in the neighborhood couldn't support solar. So is there any discussion?
Well, yeah, so there's been some improvement on that front. There's been a lot of pressure on the utilities to up their game with regard to the ability to accommodate solar. I know Pico has put online a tool that lets you basically look at your location and answers the question, I think, with a green, yellow, red kind of a color scheme that says, you should not have connection problems versus, well, maybe. And so, and that's, I think, related to things like capacity and control and so forth. And that's the extent of my expertise on that subject.
Also, everyone. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
So we're coming up on 8 o'clock in a couple minutes. I'm just going to put there's been a lot of conversation going on in the chat, very helpful conversation, information about Solarize Southeast PA, about Solarize Montgomery County that's going to be starting up. I'm just going to put in a couple emails for myself and the overall Clean Energy Co-op, as well as the Clean Energy Co-op that's us here in Southeast PA that are working on development. And also just a plug that we are looking for projects. So if you have a nonprofit or a community-oriented business and you're interested in solar, reach out to us. There's not going to be a hard sell. We're just people who want to make solar happen and see if we can be of assistance.
I see a question. Are there co-ops for Central PA? Not at the moment, but we just changed our bylaws in response to the interest in Southeast PA. So we now have a structure that says if we can get, if a group can get 10 members in a geographic area, then that are interested in forming a chapter of the co-op, then we're happy to have you. So please, reach out to one of these email addresses that Joy's putting up there. If you're interested, that'd be great. Also, our website is, it'll be updated more with chapter information, but right now, at least you can see what we're all about.
Yeah, I didn't hear anyone ask the question from Western Pennsylvania, but there is some very active Solar United Neighbors groups in Western PA, which is doing much the same thing that Solarize is doing. So it's community-based education, as well as facilitating installation.
And I do want to recognize that we do have some solar installers that have joined the session tonight. I see Todd Balson from Solar States. They're a solar installer based in Philadelphia that also has a mission to educate solar installers. And do I see anyone else? If you are, do have a solar installation company and have joined us tonight, feel free to plug yourself.
Earlier on, Athena Bowerly was on and giving some information to the chat. She did say she had to leave at about 7:30. I don't know the name of her. Oh, it's Athena at solarstates.com.
So it seems like the questions are slowing down. If there's a last minute burning question, go ahead and get it in. But otherwise, I want to say thank you to everyone for attending. Thank you to everyone who showed up to help answer questions as well. We really appreciate you being willing to also share your expertise.
Thank you all very much. This was very helpful.
Good night, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Good night. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for coming. Good night.
We can stop the recording, maybe.
Mm-hmm.